One of the things that I've enjoyed most when it comes to pursuing photo projects is just watching how they evolve over time. Either revealing themselves to you as you make the work, or just growing into something and going in a direction that looks very different from the initial idea. And for me, often it's this kind of growth and change in a project that keeps me excited about things, because without it, I often find I just lack this desire to continue, or I just feel bored with the work. And right now, just finishing up some packing for a trip up to North Wales next week to work on my Slate City project. And it inspired me to put together this video just to talk about some things that I've done that have helped me in terms of bringing variety, helping evolve it a little bit, and then also just keep me excited about it. So there's 3 things in particular I want to talk about today. And I also just want to mention quickly, I'll go into more detail near the end of the video, but I actually just released 3 images from Slate City as limited edition prints on my website. I'll put a link below to that, but yeah, I'll talk more about this near the end. So I found for me, almost always, a project is born out of some sort of like natural curiosity for a landscape or a subject. Basically, I just find something that intrigues me and I want to make more images of it. And with Slate City, that's exactly what happened. You know, I made this first trip up to North Wales back in, I think, 2022, maybe end of 2021, and absolutely fell in love with the landscape and knew I wanted to go back up there, specifically the old slate quarries and the slate landscape. For the next couple of years after that, I made return trips, photographing the old mines and quarries and machinery and buildings, and I knew that I wanted to do some sort of project about that. But what happened is it got to a point, maybe after about a year and a half or 2 years of doing that, where the images were starting to feel a little bit repetitive. And as a result, I started to get a bit bored with it and even question if it was worthwhile to pursue moving forward. What's funny is this is often how it unfolds for me, is I'll start off with like a very specific focus, and then I have to remind myself that things don't have to have such like this intense literal focus on one specific thing, and you can kind of relax the boundaries or expand the scope quite a bit. And that's what I want to talk about with this first point. So a big thing that helped me start to get excited about Slate City again was to remind myself that I can loosen the boundaries a bit of the project or expand the scope and the focus of it. What I started to think about maybe, a year ago was the fact that the Slate history played such a big role in shaping the entire region that it kind of expands things and opens up all these opportunities when you start to include things like the community and the culture as well. So all of a sudden, it's not just about going to quarry sites. There's things like portraits or environmental portraits or interiors of buildings and houses and workplaces, still lifes, photographing places of historical significance. It just goes on and on and on. So this changed a lot for me and really helped me get excited about the project again. And I feel now like it's something I could work on for, years to come and never really run out of options. And when I was putting together this video and planning it, I was thinking to myself, it's quite funny because a lot of my favorite photo books and work from other photographers often works within just these very kind of loose boundaries and guidelines. A really good example of this, favorite of mine, Sleeping by the Mississippi by Alex South. And what I love about this book is it uses the river, the Mississippi, as kind of a path to follow for image making, but the subject matter inside the book is so varied. And there's this description on the publisher's website, Mac, which I think sums it up perfectly. They say, "The Mississippi is less the subject of the book than its organizing structure. Not bound by a rigid concept or ideology, the series is created out of a quintessentially American spirit of wanderlust." And of course, with any of this stuff, there's no set rules. I think some projects will just have a lot more of like a specific, obvious focus compared to others. But I want to start with this one just because I think it can be so helpful. If you're focusing on a project or a specific subject and it's starting to feel repetitive and maybe a bit boring, can you loosen things up a bit? Can you expand the boundaries and just be a little less specific? What other opportunities exist within that world that could still tie into the project, but give you some new options of things to photograph? Okay, so the next point I want to talk about is research and planning. So I spoke in a recent video about how, history can often provide a lot of different ideas for photo projects as a whole, But also, when you're working away on a project, learning as much as you can about a landscape or a subject, I think can just open up this world of image ideas that you would never really discover otherwise. And I've spoke about this in a few different videos now, but I'm just constantly reminded about how important this is and how useful this is as well. So as an example, something that I photographed on my last trip and where I'm going to visit again is this old World War II RAF munitions storage, which is in this disused slate quarry. And what's funny is it's in a place where I would have driven by it for years. And then I came across the history of it online one day and realized it was there, and obviously could be a very interesting addition to the project that I'm working on. Another example is there's a men's choir out of Blaenau unknown to me until quite recently. They're one of the most successful choirs in Wales. As you start to learn the history of these choirs, you realize that there's such a big part of Welsh culture. So on my next trip up there, I'm going to go to one of their practice sessions and potentially make a group portrait, see if I can, or even individual portraits, but I love the idea of exploring that as a piece of the project. And then just one last example with history, something I read about recently that really excites me. This is, again, going back to World War II in the Blaenau area. There was this decision made to move, I think, close to 2,000 works of art from the National Gallery in London to Wales into this disused slate quarry. So they built these climate-controlled brick buildings down in the old mines, and they essentially hid all of this artwork because there was this fear of it being lost when London was being bombed. And nowadays, I think the brick structures are still down there. I don't know what it's like to get access to, but again, love the idea of trying to go and photograph these buildings and then, include the images in the project. So this is just something that has really excited me recently, and I think it has endless potential. If you've been feeling like things are getting repetitive or struggling to find new ideas, dig into the history of a place, dig in and do some research. And oftentimes you'll find all of these stories and all of these pieces of history that can really lead to some interesting images that you might not have made otherwise. And then the last thing, and this is something that I'm trying to remind myself of often, is to make a point of getting uncomfortable, basically doing things that are outside of your normal way of working. And I don't say this in some extreme way where you should go into a bunch of ridiculous and crazy stuff, but more so, I just think it's easy at times to fall into a routine and just make the work that we know we can make. And I think there always is, for a lot of us, some other things we want to do and some new things we want to try. And they might not even be kind of that uncomfortable to us, but it's just easy to put them off as you keep yourself busy with the work that you've always made before. And as an example for myself with Slate City, up until this point, almost all of the work I've made has been landscapes and details, basically going out into these environments and exploring. And it's what I love doing. I love being out in the landscape by myself, working solo, discovering new things. But I have told myself that I really do want to include portraits and environmental portraits in the project, and it's going to be a big focus of mine this year. But it's one of those things that has just always been kind of easy to put off because there's always so much other stuff to go and photograph. And the funny thing is I'm fairly comfortable making portraits and approaching strangers, even though there's a ton I have to learn. But just the simple fact that there's so much of the other stuff to do and that this is a little bit different, it kind of gets swept aside a bit. So this is one that I think is very important as well. If you're getting a little bit bored or if you feel like you're lacking variety with your work, there's a good chance that there's certain things you've wanted to do that you just aren't doing. And I think it's important to kind of look at your work and be honest with yourself and realize what those things are and then place a pretty heavy focus on doing them. So those are the three things that were top of mind that I wanted to talk about today, and I hope it's some food for thought. Like I said, these are three things that helped me get over the hump with this project, from feeling repetitive and feeling a bit bored to now just being very excited and feeling like there's endless opportunities for images out there. But like I said at the start, also released some prints recently. So one of the things that I want to do this year is just spend a lot more time making images for Slate City. That's why I decided to release a few of these to help me do that. So I chose three of my favorite images, 10 by 12.5 inch prints plus a border, edition of 50 for each one. And then anyone who buys a print will have their name put in the book when it's eventually published. I have had discussions about having the book published, just obviously need to make the rest of the work first. So These are up on my website. I'm printing them here and shipping them out worldwide, except for EU at the moment because of new regulations, which is a huge bummer. I'm trying to get that sorted right now, and I will update when I do. But if you're interested, I'll put a link below to this. And thank you to everyone who's bought one so far. I really do appreciate the support. But other than that, just want to say thank you for watching. As always, it's going to wrap this one up. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon.